Okay, so I think we got everybody here. The other couple emailed and said they aren't gonna make it tonight. So I guess before we get into anything formal, anybody have any questions or any topics you want to talk about, or something that didn't make sense in the slides? Okay. All right. So I'm going to pass this around. This is everybody who took the class, your name and address, phone number and email address. So the Iowa Honey Producers offers a free membership to anybody who took the class. So this is the form that I'm going to send on to Iowa Honey Producers. So check your address, make sure I've got everything correct. If you don't want the free membership, draw a line through your name. I mean, you don't have to take it, but it's free. They're not going to harass you or anything. It's a good deal. And then I've got information for 8 or 7 people, and we've got 8 people in the class. So I missed somebody. I don't have somebody's name and address. No, I've got you, Eric. So I'm not sure who I'm missing, but if you want the membership, go ahead and write your name, address. Yeah, I think they do want phone number and email too. So I'll pass that around. Has everybody got a pen, or can borrow one if you need it? Dave, you want to talk about the Iowa Honey Producers while they're going through that?
Yeah. Everybody that has taken this class has gotten a free membership to the honey producers, and I'm still a member, so is everybody else, I think. It's a statewide organization, and it's mainly, there are some, I guess there's quite a few commercial beekeepers in there, but there's a lot of hobbyist beekeepers in there too. And so it's a great source of a way for you to get acquainted with people that have been in the business a long time. And there's an annual convention, and I'm sure there's other events around throughout the year, workshops and things. But to me, the convention in the fall, it's usually around Veterans Day.
Last of October, I think it is.
They've moved it. Used to always be Veterans Day. Now
Yeah.
they've moved it. But yeah, last October.
Yep. And so I didn't hear where it was going to be this year.
Altoona.
Altoona. Okay. So it's a big enough venue that it's an entire convention center takes over, because there's a lot of sessions going on at the same time. But it gives you a chance, and they bring in speakers that are really current and topical now. People that do the research in the beekeeping business, and some of those, usually for the past several years, it's been those personalities, those YouTube personalities that we're used to seeing. Cayman Reynolds, Tom Seeley, those folks, and people that have written books sometimes are there as vendors or whatever. So it's really an interesting situation, and it's not expensive, so it's really worth the trip. And it's usually a 3-day deal, I think, isn't it?
2 days.
Two full days.
Friday, Saturday.
Friday, Saturday, and then you're out of there on Sunday. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing, and it gets you acquainted with some people, and usually the beekeepers from here usually have pretty good representation there. Yep.
The other thing they do is they have a booth at the Iowa State Fair.
Yep.
It's a big booth where they sell honey.
The Iowa Honey Producers is who produces the queen, the honey queen for the state. There's a young gal, usually a high school gal, that is the honey queen. And she makes, I'm stunned at the number of appearances she makes throughout the year. They are really active. I mean, they will go and speak anywhere. They're fairly knowledgeable, usually have experience, and they represent the industry pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
thank
do
you.
they send us like an email or?
So yeah, there'll be a monthly email. They call it the Buzz. So there's like some beekeeping articles in it, and like when the convention is coming up, they'll talk about the speakers who are going to be at the convention. They'll talk about the Iowa State Fair. There's a lot of people will enter honey in the Iowa State Fair. So you would think you just take a jar of honey and send it in and it'll do well, but no, there's all kinds of stuff you have to know how to do to make it so it'll actually have a chance of winning a ribbon. So there's information like that and how to enter.
We have a honeybee day at the Iowa State Capitol too on the 26th of March, where they have all the representatives, state offices can get acquainted with people or see what concerns that beekeepers have. We went last year, we'll be going this year again, keep a day up displays and stuff, so they can talk with your people who are in charge of a lot of things.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's an official lobbyist, but there's a person designated from the Iowa honey producers that is the lobbyist. That's our voice in the legislature.
Yeah, one of the things and I'm pretty sure that Iowa Honey Producers pays him something. I'm not, like you said, I don't know if it's official or if it's, it's not a full-time position or full-time pay, and then one of the things that they're working on, that he's working on is, you have to, when you buy packaged bees or nukes in Iowa, you have to pay sales tax on them. And it's the only livestock where you have to pay sales tax, and they've been trying for a few years to get the law changed on that. So it's a good organization. It supports a lot of activities that you might not think about or that no one else might be working on. So
that meeting gives you access, get acquainted access to the state atheist also. Mm-hmm. And Andy Joseph is accessible to all of us to the state. And he's been over to Sioux City many times.
Yeah.
I've seen him come over for one person, one hive, and come and inspect it. And it was, let him know what's going on with the
Yeah. And Andy is a resource available to any beekeeper in the state of Iowa. But he's pretty big at the conventions too. I mean, he's on the board, and usually there's at least one talk that he gives. And I always like catching his state of Iowa beekeeping talk that he does. He's the only person that I know of that you'll find in the state that can say, yeah, on this end of the state this year it started out really wet, and on this end it started out really dry, and then the bees started catching this, and then that went away. And he's just in so many hives across the state. I always enjoy hearing him talk. Yeah.
I also have a lot of vendors there at this state conference too, so.
Yep.
Man Lake and Daydan.
Yeah, so you get to check out some equipment that you wouldn't be able to see in person otherwise. Yeah. So I mentioned quite a while back that I spent 2 years working for Bee Informed Partnership. One of the things that I did while I was there was went to the Tri-State Convention in Fargo. So it was North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota. And I expected, it to be this huge convention. And I'd gone to the Iowa one for 5 or 8 years before that. So the convention in Fargo was, 110 people, somewhere in that vicinity. And I didn't think that was all that great, but I'm asking some of the vendors, because I actually went with Bee Informed Partnership. We had a booth. And the vendors are saying, oh no, this is a pretty well-attended state meeting. You go to the Iowa meeting, what, 250? 300 to 400 people. So, and since then I've talked to some of the speakers that they get, and they say that Iowa is one of the biggest state meetings that they're aware of. And the speakers always talk about how well organized it is and things flow really smoothly. So it's a gym that we should take advantage of. It's not that far for us. So it's pretty cool.
And another thing with Siouxland Beekeepers, if you're a member of that, they paid for the registration fee for the last couple of years. They have enough funds they don't pay for your hotel or all your eating and stuff, but they paid a $85 registration fee for the couple of days.
Yeah, if you're a member of Siouxland Beekeepers and you go to the Iowa convention, they will pay your registration fee.
How much is the Siouxland Beekeepers?
30 for family.
20 for an individual.
20 for an individual? There you
So
go.
that's a pretty good bargain.
Yep, yep. That reminds me, so that was in Phil's email. Did everybody get a chance to see Phil's email about ordering through Premier?
Yeah, it didn't say, it says there's a discount, it didn't say how much.
So the prices in there are discounted. If you look, there's a price and then that's drawn out and there's a cheaper one and it's a 20% discount. But what you're seeing as the price in there is already discounted.
Oh, okay.
I've got some of their frames and foundation. I really like them. The frames go together better and they seem to be a little sturdier. When they finally make the Propola boxes in 8-frame mediums, I'll probably start, I won't replace mine, but I'll start buying those. The Propola has got, the inside of it is roughed up and the bees will coat it with propolis, and that's shown to be pretty beneficial. Knocks down on diseases, brood diseases, makes them healthier. They said, I watched the promo today, that you can get up to like 2 more frames of bees per hive by using those boxes, which seems pretty significant to me.
What's the deal with those weird looking boxes? They got a weird lid and a weird entrance, like air,
Acclimate,
yeah.
plastic ones, or
Oh, is that what they are, is
Well,
plastic?
They have a kit where they have the plastic ones, but they also have a kit where you can put the plastic top and the plastic bottom board on. But I didn't understand, they didn't say anything about the benefits of those.
Was that in the Premier stuff?
Yeah,
I missed that. I didn't see it.
well, yeah, it was on their website.
Okay,
Everybody likes that 8-mite insulated top.
okay. It's,
In that top system, there's an insert that goes in there and then provides feeder and an insulated.
so maybe that's the main thing is insulation. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and they have the plastic hives.
And I can see the plastic bottom board, for instance, would last a lot longer than a wooden one. I haven't thrown away any boxes yet. I've been beekeeping for 15 years. I've got some that probably need to be thrown away, but I have thrown away quite a few bottom boards because that's where the moisture ends up and they sit closest to the ground. They get dirt and snow and stuff on them. So I could see a plastic bottom board lasting longer. Might be worth checking into.
I've gotten screen in the bulk feeders is going away on the, and it's only 3 years old.
The screen's dissolving or
It
is
is rusted in several places,
Yep,
so it's just going up to the place.
yeah.
There is stuff that maintenance that has to be done.
Okay, so we'll go through some questions and see if anybody has any questions, and then Dean's got some equipment that we'll look at. So we'll just go through, and I'll start with you again. Why is inspecting a colony of bees considered a fundamental skill?
So you can know what you need to do with the bees, if you need to do anything, kind of watch them and see if they got any diseases or problems you might need to
Yep.
take action for.
Yep, exactly. Yep, you need to know how to find the problems so that you can head them off before they turn into big problems. What are some common mistakes beginners make when inspecting a colony?
So how you approach the hive,
Sure.
do you disturb it a lot, or the movements, do you use a smoker or not?
Yep, those are good ones.
Pull the frames out, when you bring them up, do you start, where do you start in the hive? Do you start on the sides, do you start in the middle?
Yep,
When you pull it out, do you kind of drag it out, or do you pull it straight up to make sure that you don't hurt any bees, but especially the queen.
yep, good. Yeah, so you don't start with that outer frame. Start with one in and pull it straight up so that you don't roll a bunch of bees or pinch the queen. Yep. Something that I was always reluctant, and I think a lot of new beekeepers are too, is I didn't want, even when I had the frame out and I'm looking at it, I didn't want to like move them around or disturb them too much. But really, you want a frame that's really covered in bees, but you also need to move them out of the way so you can see in the cells. And that's a big mistake I think a lot of beginners make. So don't be afraid to, if you blow on them, they'll typically move out of your way. Or you can use a hive tool or something and gently move them, but don't be afraid to move them around and get to where you can see what you need to see. So what are some of the reasons why we observe the entrance before we start opening the colony up?
See if there's more bees going in.
Yep.
There might be robbing going on,
Yep.
or they might be swarming if there's more bees.
Yeah. Look for any changes, and as you're starting out, you're looking at it just to get a feel for what's normal. So yeah, yep. So we've talked about some ways of removing the inner cover. So how do you do that? You've got the telescoping cover off, and now that inner cover that sticks down is on there. So what's a good way to get it off?
Frames?
Nope. The
Top cover,
yeah. So
inner cover.
there you go.
Okay.
Yep. And then also when you pry it up,
Then you gotta
It's
put
good.
your smoker in it, wait 30 seconds.
yep. And then if you hold your hand on top when you pry it, that'll deaden the sound, because they usually, when they pop off, yeah, they make a pretty unique sound. So yeah, yep. What are some indications that a hive might be getting ready to swarm?
Running out of room.
Yep, running out of room. And and the text might not cover this real well, so what's one of the first signs of them running out of room?
They
Anybody?
did talk about it a little bit, was it six frames covered? There's so many frames covered with bees, when you open it up.
Well, queen cells is a sign, but it's a little further along.
They're putting nectar in the open cells.
Yes, they start putting nectar in the brood cells. So where they should be open so the queen could lay, they'll start filling those up. So that's one of the earliest signs is and not necessarily a complete frame all the way full. It's like you'll see, capped brood here and then some nectar in there in the middle. And it's like, oh, if I don't do something right away, they're gonna fill all of these up. And that's one of the earliest signs is nectar in the brood nest, because they're out of space. They don't have anywhere else to put it. So you're on the right track too. Before this happened, you need to be paying attention. If you've got like 7 out of the 10 frames full, it's time to add another box. So if you didn't do that, what they're gonna do is they're gonna start filling up the brood nest, because they're now on all 10 frames and nowhere to expand. So yeah, you're on the right track. You're just
So that just means you need to add one on top.
yeah, add another one. Yeah, or if you've got your 2 deeps on, you've got 20 frames, if they've got that second box, if it's almost full, then you're gonna add a honey super. Yeah. Eric, right? So before you've got the telescoping cover off, you've got the inner cover off, before you start pulling frames out, is there anything that you should be looking for? Yep, look at the top of the frames, look in between them, and see how many of them are covered with bees. Yep. And some beekeepers will even go so far as, before you start taking boxes off, they'll record, okay, there's 3 frames of bees, or there's 10 frames of bees in this box. Yeah,
So you asked about questions, another question I had.
yeah,
So there's a slide in here about swarming. So it kind of covers the topic we just was about it. Says if you don't give the bees enough room soon enough, or if the bees don't start using the honey super, then they will start to store the incoming nectar in the brood cells, right?
yep.
It says in parentheses, they can do this if it's new foundation. What, you mean, like with frames with new foundation that hasn't been touched?
Yeah.
Why is that?
So, and yeah, that is a good question.
Like me, I'm gonna have, everything's gonna be new foundation.
Yeah, and most of you are going to start out with everything is new foundation. So, you remember when we had different frames in here and I said that they like the foundationless first? They'll draw those frames out
Yeah.
first. Then they'll draw out wax foundation. Then they'll draw out plastic that's covered in wax. So they just don't like the plastic as well. So if all you are giving them is all plastic covered in wax, they're still reluctant to draw it out. So I've seen a couple of new beekeepers have this happen where the bottom box gets filled out to, 7 frames. They add the upper box. They come back a week later and the bottom box is now 10 frames and they're still ignoring the upper box. And so they're like, well, they've got the 20 frames, they got plenty of room, come back in a week. Well, they come back in a week and there's queen cells in the bottom box. The top box is still not touched. So sometimes they can be so reluctant to go up on the plastic foundation and draw it out. They can be so reluctant that they just decide, that's not really hive space, we're out of room, it's time to swarm. So, and I need to add this to the text. I need to add a lot of things, but what you can do in that situation, the first time you discover, hey, this box has been on here a week and they really don't seem to be doing much with it, as long as it's warm enough, which it should be if you put a second box on by now. As long as it's warm enough, you can draw 1 frame or 2 frames out of the bottom box up into the top box. So now you've got drawn frames, maybe brood frames up in the top box. You put a couple of the empty ones down in the bottom, and you can split that brood nest up a little bit and put some of those undrawn frames in there, and that will encourage them to draw them out, because now they're in between 2 drawn brood frames. If it was early in the year where it's still getting below 50 degrees at night, you wouldn't want to do that because you're splitting the brood nest up too much. But like I said, by the time you're adding your second box on, it's going to be, it's 50 degrees at night or 60 degrees at night. It's not an issue with chilling them.
Does anyone do like all foundations?
I have done it sometimes, but they start getting things pretty crooked. So I went.
Well, I noticed like, 'cause I was looking for foundationless frame, like, you get boxes and they come with frames, but they always come with frames with foundation.
Yeah.
You just get those and cut the foundation out if you want to do
You
that?
just pop it out if you want to do that.
You can, yeah.
Plastic just pops right out of the frame.
So some of my frames that I showed early on just had like a bevel across the top.
Yeah.
So you can buy them like that. Or you can buy the normal ones that you would put the plastic in and then just glue something else in there. I've also done with the Premier foundation. It's pretty easy to cut into strips, about 1 inch, 1.25 inches. Then I just glue that 1.25 inch foundation in there and leave the rest foundationless. Yeah, they'll start following it and then they use that straight edge.
But then you have to be real careful when you're inspecting, especially on a hot day, because with the plastic foundation, it's all solid all the way around. You're doing foundationless, and you get that frame one way or the other, that whole thing can fall out of the frame.
Do you remember when I showed you some top bar frames where it was just that V and no sides at all? So I've used those in a deep, and those you really have to be careful with, like Dean's saying. If you try and tip that by the top, it'll snap off. So when you pull it up out of the hive, you can't do this. If you want to see the other side, you end up flipping it around, holding it upright. And then, so yeah, that's something to consider. Once they've got the foundationless attached to the bottom of the frame, then they're pretty sturdy. I even extract them when they're attached to the bottom and the sides. So.
Yeah, I want to touch on wire support in the frames in case somebody runs into an over.
So I've never used wax foundation. So have either of you used them and wired them?
Not intentionally.
Not intentionally?
I've gotten them.
So if you're using a deep frame and it's all wax foundation, the wax can be so thin and flimsy that they recommend you run three wires through it. And then there's different ways of embedding those wires in the foundation. And the bees will draw the comb out and the wires end up in the middle there for support. So yeah, if you buy a nuke, That's where mine has come from. I buy a nuke and somebody years ago used the wired foundation, or you can actually buy wax foundation that's got the wire already in it. And then there's ways of attaching that to the frame. So yeah, you may find some where it's wax foundation with wires running through it.
It's a lot easier to just use the good foundation in the frame.
Okay.
I would want to add to that, John, that
Mhm.
in starting your first round of bees, again, you're talking about adding boxes. You're talking about adding the second brood box
Yep.
and watching the difference between the upper and lower brood boxes, not necessarily happening in the honeycomb.
Yeah.
You gotta get them established in that bottom box first.
So if you're gonna, like Canton has two of the brood boxes, you just wanna start with the one, right?
You wanna start with the one until you see them working on it.
Yeah.
If you don't, and you have a small population, they'll stall right there. You give them two boxes, they'll stall in the first.
And it's a lot for them to patrol, like to defend from ants and other predators. If it's cold, it's a lot for them to keep warm. So yeah, definitely start with one box. Even if you get a 5-frame nuke, I'd still start with one box. But the same rule of thumb, package or a nuke, when they get out to about 7 out of those 10 frames are drawn and being worked, then you can start adding the other
So
box.
if you're looking, sorry to interrupt you, if you're looking just to like, get some strong hives, maybe not honey, but just get strong hives and maybe multiply them, you just get like, started in the one brood, get them swarm, and do another one brood, and just keep them in one all year long? And then maybe add super as they do them?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
several things there to be concerned about or to pay attention to, because yes, you could do that. In the end, then you're going to go into winter with 1 10-frame deep per hive, and that's kind of small for around here. That's not quite enough room for them to store enough honey to get through the winter, although people have done it. So that'd be one thing to be concerned about. The other thing is letting them get to that swarm state and then trying to catch it at the right time can be tricky. Because sometimes they'll go right away and sometimes they won't. And then, maybe you don't get to them for a couple of days and then they actually swarmed and you weren't there to catch them. Now you've lost those bees unless you're, fortunate enough
So the
to.
thing to do, like if you're trying to multiply hives,
Mhm.
get into the 2 deep stage and then maybe transfer frames over.
I'll have to think about it for a minute. So, yeah, and if you wanted to do it on the cheap, you could buy one package or one nuke. I'd say build them up until, those 2 deeps are really full of bees. And then this is getting a little more advanced, but your best way of raising queens would be to go in and find the queen and take the frame that she's on and 2 or 3 other frames with the bees, put them in a nuke somewhere. So now your big hive is queenless and they will raise a new queen. The other thing is they're well populated. One of the keys to getting a quality queen is the population in the hive needs to be pretty high. You've also taken away some of the brood, so there's not as much brood for them to feed, so they'll pay more attention to these queen cells. And then the next thing is you would want to time it so that you can go in and when those queen cells are capped, you can move them and instead of just letting them raise 1, because there'll be a dozen queen cells in there. So you can split them up into 4 different hives or 5 different hives, however many, if you've got enough bees. And then you'll get multiple queens out of it. And the ones that aren't successful, you can add those bees back into the ones that are, and,
You won't be able to do that the second year. You won't have enough drawn out
yeah,
frames in the first year.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You've got to really feed them and get them to make those frames full.
yeah. But, there's a potential of, you try too late in the year to do that, and they're not gonna have enough time to raise a queen and build up. Plus, you've set back the original hive by pulling a bunch of frames out of it. So yeah, it's probably not something you'd get accomplished without drawn combs in the first year.
The first year, I borrowed drawn home from John, because I just knew that there wasn't enough there, and a couple of his sweet used frames really did the trick in getting to start building those houses. Up to that point, they were just lazy. They weren't doing much, because they had all brand new virgin
Yeah,
foundation in there, and it was just
Yeah.
too much work.
You know, and that's another way of getting them to go up into a new box, is to put an old brood comb in there that's been used and drawn, like if you can buy a few from somebody else, or if you have some from, previous years beekeeping. Yeah, used comb will draw them up pretty good too.
more like something from the roof.
Yeah, yep, something from a nuke, yeah, yeah. So how can we tell the difference between capped honey and capped brood? The capped brood is darker. Yep, and you'll get a feel for it, and but yeah, that's definitely, the capped brood is darker.
It's not, you have to pay attention to that difference. The first year, I pulled all the frames out and took them up to Dean's house, and did not realize that there were brood frames they had started laying brood up in the honey supers. Did not know it, realized it till Dean came out and discovered they had about half a dozen frames there that were full of brood. I was ready to take them and extract them. Yummy.
This is a frame of capped honey. And the other thing is, there's two different ways that the bees will cap the honey. I don't know, this one is a little bit weird. It's kind of got a mixture of both. Out here, see how it's really white?
Yeah.
And there's a little layer of air between the honey and the wax capping on those. And in this area, the wax is right on the wax, or the wax is right on the honey, and it looks kind of wet. And it's genetics, there you go. That's like the more common kind of white, where there's a little bit of air there.
And the capped honey is more like a whitish gray, right? Capped brood is
Capped brood is
golden, like brown.
gold to brown, yep, and the honey is usually white.
That's what they make.
Yep, absolutely, yep. Okay. Why do the bees keep pollen and nectar and honey around the open brood cells?
That's the main food source for the larvae as they grow.
Yep, the nurse bees need to eat that to produce the royal jelly that they feed to them. And then at some point, yes, they start feeding them a mix of honey and pollen too. Yep, so the resources are real close to where they need them. So how can you distinguish a healthy larva and a larva that might be sick?
Is there also the jelly? It's a healthy larva?
Yep, lots of royal jelly, yep.
Is there dark spots maybe if they're diseased or something?
Off color, and a lot of it's kind of yellowish or yellow-brown, so yeah, you're on the right track. Why is it important to recognize bee diseases?
Healthy?
Yep, keep them healthy so you can figure out if and when you need to do something with them, yep. Eric, how can you improve your chances of seeing eggs in the cells?
You take the frame, turn it upside down with the center of your back and put it down.
Yep.
Get to the top of the cells.
Top of the cells? You don't actually have to turn the frame upside down, but you're on the right track. You want to tilt it until the sun can hit the bottoms of the cells. And that's where the eggs are, and the sunlight getting in there will let you see them, yeah. If you're looking for mite poop, that is on the tops of the cells, so that's where you turn the frame upside down to see it, yep. So what does it mean if we find eggs in the hive?
If there's a line clean, if they're in the middle, formation.
Yep. Yep, so there's been laying queen within the last 3 days, because they're only an egg for 3 days. Okay. When should you look for a queen during the inspection? Or why should you look for the queen, I guess?
Just see where she's at, see if she's healthy, or whatever it is that she's doing. It's probably one of the, it's good to find one. It's not essential if you got eggs.
Exactly, yep. If you're seeing open larvae and eggs, you know the queen is there. You don't have to go looking for her. If you're not seeing open larvae and eggs, then maybe something went wrong. You need to look for her to see if she's there or not, yeah, yeah.
And if she is there, then try something else.
Yeah, if she is there, then why isn't she laying in them? And something that I have seen new beekeepers be tricked by is, I can't find eggs, and they find the queen, and it's like, well, the queen is there, what's going on? How come there aren't any eggs? And an experienced beekeeper goes and looks, and all of those brood cells are full of nectar. So it can trick you because, again, you got to tilt the frame and get the light to flash off all of that nectar, or you don't know that there's nectar in them instead of empty cells. So that can get beginners.
You say there's maybe plus 2 eggs, or?
Yeah.
Is there,
Because all of the brood cells are full of nectar. You're not finding any eggs in them because they got nectar in them. So nothing wrong with the queen in that case.
Not to say there won't be nectar in some of the brood flies.
Yeah.
There may be some in there.
So there's capped brood. So capped honey, capped brood. When you see them side by side, it's a pretty obvious difference. So there's some disease brood. Okay. So this is pollen, this is capped honey, this is capped brood, this is open larva. It wouldn't be unheard of for there to be nectar in these cells. And a lot of times there'll be like a half moon of pollen and nectar around the brood. But when you start seeing, see these that are, the bees have emerged out of those cells, you start seeing nectar in those, that's an indication of them running out of room. That's where you shouldn't find nectar. But it is normal, like Dave says, to find it on the edges of the brood nest, because they need it.
The process of making the bead bread, the golden stuff you see in there at the top. The combination of pollen and the nectar.
Yep. Where are we? I think it's your turn. So what are some techniques for locating the queen on a frame?
Starting with the ones that should likely be on, so like the middle one.
Yep, like the middle one, or if you saw eggs, that one. Yep. Anybody else
See the group of bees facing.
see a group of bees facing her?
Kind of a circle.
Yeah.
Why does it do that?
Why does it do that? Yeah, so the queen pheromone, and anytime the bees sense the queen is near there, they look at her. Does she need anything? Do you need to be fed? Do you need to be cleaned? And so literally, as the queen is walking around, the bees will turn to her,
So
and they
how
touch her,
often
and
do you see that?
the better the queen, the more often you see that circle. I'll be honest with you, I don't see a whole lot in mine. I've seen some pictures where it's a ball of bees all the way around her, and it's obvious. But I think on average, I'll notice 4 or 6 bees doing that. What do you guys
When you're
think?
watching an observation hive, if she's around laying eggs, they'll be around her constantly, but then you might have a wild thing that's deciding to go to the other side of the frame.
Yeah.
And she's moving, and there's many, but if she's poking around laying eggs, they'll always be out like a bullseye, and they're looking for it. And to see her too, the way she moves across the frame, all these other bees are kind of, like those are just feeding or walking around or doing something, and she's gonna be moving differently than the rest of them. That's another way to kind of spot her.
You can move the lubricant.
Totally.
Those, the rest of them are just kind of wandering around aimlessly.
It's really cool to try to take a picture of it with your phone or your camera, because there she is, and okay, you get this out.
No, it's what
Where'd she go?
So when you're holding a frame of bees, and there's all kinds of bees on it, and one bee decides it wants to go over here, the other bees don't care. it kind of pushes its way through, or it crawls over them, or it goes under them, or it just waits for them to get out of its way. The queen, when the queen decides to go a direction, the bees move out of her way. And it's subtle, but that's one of the ways that you might spot it. It's like, you see all of these bees doing this, and then all of a sudden you see bees parting ways. Well, here comes the queen. The other thing you can do is tilt the frame so the sun is shining off the bee's back, because the sun will reflect off of the queen differently. I mean, she's bigger, it's going to be different. And then the first thing I do, especially as you pull a frame up, when you pull the frame up, scan all with your eyes, look all the way around the outer edges, because the sun's probably behind you. This side of the frame is going to be darker, and the queen will a lot of times cross over to the darker side of the frame. So if you look really quick, you might see her going around the corner. And then a lot of times I'll do this too, because that really is, especially when it's a good sunny day, that's a good way to catch them.
There's another good way to see a queen. There's a marking cage, you get the queen in that. So, get the queen inside that and push that plunger up so she can't move, and you can put that marker for the bottom of the back.
So there's good, healthy brood there. I'm catching up with some of the slides. This is the discoloration. That's like the beginning of the discoloration. See how it's in the little indentations in the larva. It's like,
see that? How would you know?
it's a lot smaller than it is in the picture, but yeah, you'll see it. And you'll be looking at a clump of larvae and notice it, and then, but if you have trouble, take a picture with your cell phone and zoom in on it. So the cell phone can be really, really handy. I was going to say there's some more discolored ones there, some off-colored.
Is it easy to, if say you have flower, is it most, readings, you have chunks of American flower and European flower?
Yep.
Is it pretty easy to tell the difference between the two?
Yeah.
Because it said that the American flower, you just, kind of have.
Yeah. So initial indications, they're fairly easy to confuse, the discolored larva and like the sunken cappings. If you get to looking at some of the pictures, there's some visual cues, but the main thing is when you find a dead larva or a cell that's got dead larvae in it, you take like a toothpick or something similar to a toothpick, you stir that larva up, and then you pull the toothpick out. An American foul brood, that slimy larva will be ropey. I mean, like something that's sticky, and it'll actually go 1.5 inches. It'll stick to your toothpick and pull out 1.5 inches before it springs back. Nothing else will get ropey that far. I've seen something, I don't know what it was, where, yeah, there's a little bit of ropey. It's like, no, American foul brood is like 1.5 inches before it comes off of the toothpick.
You ever had that?
I have not, no.
There was, for instance, a couple years ago up in Northwest Ireland,
That's not very common.
no. And I think Andy Joseph said that he sees it once in a while. And that's the closest I heard about it around here that I can describe it.
Yep. I know,
I have had a notice in with Andy Joseph for 2 years, to Paul, if he ever runs across. I would travel halfway across the state to photograph it,
oh,
and it did not have a picture.
So that's good.
whose turn is it? I'm totally lost.
She just left the room.
Oh, that makes it your turn then, Lance, right? Yeah.
Well, it's not very common, but about the time that we don't mention it in a class, then suddenly somebody's gonna be
Yeah.
infected with it and not realize it.
Yep.
So, we were talking about plastic frames and whatnot. Would you have to destroy those too, the big ones? Would that hold it?
Yeah, well, American foul brood.
I think it would.
The entire
They
one.
burn it all.
With the plastic ones?
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
And not just that hive, it's the other ones, if you got 5 hives there, that the spores are spread.
It's that contagious.
Yeah.
$1,000.
Yeah. Well, and you know, that's one reason why if you're able to, don't keep all your hives in one yard if you don't have to. If something happens like that, then you only lose the ones that are in that yard. But yeah.
I could see how that could be a before we.
So American foul brood is unique in that it's got several different stages, and like the spore stage, these little spores get into the equipment, and I think you might be able to scorch the inside of a hive and reuse it, but I mean, you'd really have to scorch it, and especially the corners. But by the time you were done scorching a frame, it had been burnt on anyway, so yeah. So how can beekeepers prevent a hive from swarming when it starts running out of space?
Yeah, supers.
Add supers, yep. And then, it's not in the text enough, but you might want to check and see, are they using the supers? And if they aren't, you can't really pull a frame up into a medium super. I have an advantage since all of mine are medium. I can pull frames up into the honey supers and then put them back down. Some things you can do if they're not going up into the honey supers and using them, you could put sugar syrup on them, and the bees will go up there and clean them off. And once they've cleaned it off, now it smells more like bees than it does plastic, and they're more likely to go up in there again.
You don't use a full excluder right away, usually if you can get that rolled up in the supers.
Yeah, that's the other thing. If you've got a queen excluder on and they're not going up into your supers, maybe try taking the queen excluder off for a week or a few days.
Way back down.
If the queen goes up in there, you'd probably want to try and physically move her back down. If you find her and gently shake that frame down in, you can knock her off. Or if you're comfortable with picking her up or using a queen clip, we haven't shown them a queen clip. So there's a thing, you got one? So the queen clip, you can squeeze it open, you put it on the frame over the queen and gently close it, and it's got those openings that the bees can get through, but the queen can't. So you could catch her in that, and then you could let her go down below. Okay. So Eric talked about like this, when will they raise an emergency queen, and what are some things that are kind of unique to emergency queens?
Emergency queen, they will raise one when the queen's been injured. They take out a frame.
Yep.
And clean it out and injure it. That is an emergency queen. They start, so they go to food cell, open larva cell.
Okay.
Spend 12 to 24 hours or something like that. And then raise up, they'll build it out in the middle of a frame.
Yep. Good. Yep. And then how about supersede your cell? What's that? Or supersede your queen?
Well, that's when they need to replace their queen.
Something wrong with the queen. Yep. How does it compare with the emergency cell?
Is that on the bottom?
Nope. Swarm cells are on the bottom. So yeah, supersedure and emergency are very similar because they're going to find the larva that's 2.5 days old and start with those. Therefore, the cell is going to be where that larva is at, and a lot of times that's on the edge of the brood nest. Swarm cell is because they ran out of space. The queen's got nowhere to lay except for those cells that are on the bottom. So a lot of times your swarm cells are on the bottom, and there can be exceptions, but. Yeah, so we talked about this. They find a cell that's the right age, and they elongate that cell, and they actually put so much royal jelly in it that kind of floats that larva out, and then the cell will end up pointing down. For some reason, queen cells always point down, even if they start out as a normal cell. Those are, the foundation below it isn't drawn, but this was on the edge of the brood nest. So that's kind of how you'll see them in that half moon shape, supersedure or emergency.
You said they raise multiple queens.
Mhm.
Instead of one that don't produce.
So yeah, only the strong one survives, right? A lot of times the bees will tear down some of those cells. There's some studies out there that say that the bees can tell bad queens, and they'll actually tear those cells down first. But the ones that go to maturity, the first one to hatch will start running around, and she'll sting the queens in the other cells before they emerge and kill them. Yeah. There are situations where, like, the hive swarms, the first queen is gone. The first new virgin that comes out, she may not get all of the other ones, or she may not, I don't know if it's intentional, but sometimes you'll have multiple swarms out of a hive. So they may not kill all of them, and you may end up with 2 swarms and then 1 new queen in the original location.
If a queen comes out, you might hear them chirping in there too,
Yeah,
because of
piping.
piping.
Yep.
I've heard that before, because the queen's out looking around. Sounds like that inside the hive, and this queen's trying to draw another queen if there's one in there to her.
It's like challenging, you know, like they're challenging each other. And so like the one that's loose does it, and the ones in the cells, like echo her. You would think that they'd be smart enough to, like, I'm not gonna let them know where we're at, because that is one of the ways that the other queen will find the cell and kill her. So yeah, it's.
So you thought there was bees and honey and that's it?
So this frame is a brood frame, and see how the light's reflecting off all of those? So this is a brood frame that's been completely filled with nectar. You'd have to get the bees out of the way, but if you did, that's all nectar. There's nowhere for the queen to lay in that one. So there's an example.
What do you do with that if you find that? Just leave it there?
So,
Because it's kind of taking up it's food,
mhm.
but it's also taking up a certain counterproductive purpose, right?
Yeah, it's food in where you want them raising baby bees, right? So you tell me, what condition is the hive in when you find this? This is one of those situations where I don't have enough information to answer the question, or I don't want to say it depends. So what's the rest of the hive look like when you found this frame?
Overcrowded?
Yeah. So anybody else have the answer? What's you need to do with this?
Should have a super box on a week.
Should have had a super box on a week or so ago,
But you didn't.
right? Yeah, so if you got,
I plan on checking it next week. Well, then it's too late. You should have done it last week, or put 2 boxes on them as well.
so let's say you got 20 frames, you go into the brood nest and you start finding these. The brood frames are completely filled. So first thing to do would be go all the way through the hive and see if there are queen cells already. If you've got queen cells, then it's like, what stage are they in? When's it safe to move? It's your turn all of a sudden. When's it safe to move a queen cell?
Not a clue.
Not a clue? Anybody?
Can you just knock them off?
When they're capped?
When they're capped. Yeah, so before they're capped, especially right before they're capped, they're very delicate. You don't want to move them. But once they're capped, they're not as fragile, and you can move them. Can you just knock them off? What'll happen? Anybody? I'm pointing at you, but I'm saying anybody. Sorry. Anybody, what'll happen if you knock the queen cells off?
You may destroy the new queen, the old queen may be already gone.
Yeah, old queen might be gone already, and you destroy all the queen cells. Now they've got no way to raise a new one. Yeah. The other thing is it going to stop the swarming process? No, because they're swarming because they're out of room. They're not, I don't want to insult anybody. It seems obvious. They're not swarming because they have queen cells. They have queen cells because they're swarming, and that's because they're out of room. So destroying the queen cells doesn't fix the problem that created it in the first
I
place.
would rather take my new box, and if there's 3 frames in there with queen cells on them, pull them out, leave one in there with queen cells, but take the other 2 out and put them in different new boxes, and you can have 2 new hives started.
How long can a new box last on its own?
Well, it depends. If it gets crowded, it's gonna swarm too.
Yeah.
But you can put it in there for emergency. You got 3 queens there. You wanna buy a queen, it's gonna cost you $35-40. Right there, you got this extra queen that you can put in a new box for 3-4 weeks or so.
Mhm.
And then you might have to have another heat box set up to have another
So
hive.
the people that sell nukes, they're just constantly trying to swarm their boxes, basically, it has all work.
The ones who sell the meat boxes are buying queens
Yeah,
from California or Georgia or someplace. So when their bees are coming back from California next month, March, April, those bees are gonna be full in their boxes. They need to be split out, so guys buy,
I see.
buy a bunch of queens and then you got 20 frames of bees, pull 4 or 5 of them out, put in, or 3 out in a nuke box with a queen, and you can make, 6, 8 nukes out of that.
yeah, so they'll put the fully drawn frames with bees and brood and everything in the box, no queen. Then they get these new queens, put 1 queen in each nuke box. A lot of times they do them like in Texas, they'll try and do it somewhere where there's a bit of a nectar flow, so that while this new queen is starting to lay, the bees are bringing in nectar. And as soon as they've verified that that queen is good and laying, then they want to sell that nuke to you, so you've got to deal with it. They don't want it to get so full it's going to swarm on them. Yeah. So getting back to Eric's question, we've got several frames like this. What do we do? So some of the things that are important is you need to go through and see if you've got queen cells. If you find a couple of frames like this and then a couple of brood frames where there's still some space for her to lay and you don't find any queen cells, you've caught it in time to prevent the swarming.
So yeah, super.
So add a super. What I would do, you need to give them some space in the brood nest. So I guess best case scenario is, let's say you find a couple of frames in there that are capped honey. Take those frames of capped honey out, put them in your deep freeze, put 2 frames of undrawn foundation in the brood nest. So what that'll do, as soon as the bees start to draw that out just a little bit, the queen will lay eggs in it. Before it's drawn out far enough for them to put nectar in it, the queen will lay eggs in it. So now there's more brood, there's a place for her to lay, there's more space. Just 2 frames isn't going to be enough. So you're going to want to at least take 2 frames out and add your honey super. If you were Todd Osterber and you honey supers and brood frames are all deeps, or if you do like I do, mine are all mediums, I can move things around. I can put a couple of boxes on. I can put several empty frames in that brood nest so that they have space. The bees no longer feel crowded. Just putting an empty box on top sometimes isn't enough, but it's all you can do. In my scenario, if I wanted to, I could put an empty box in between the 2 brood boxes, and they'll move into that and they'll fill it up and they won't swarm. So, this is a situation where you've caught it before the swarm process is so far along that you can't stop it, but you do have to add a lot of space. If you come along and there's capped queen cells in there, you obviously can't stop it from swarming, but you may be catching it and the original queen is still there. So take out some of the frames with the queen cells, make some nukes, put undrawn frames in the original hive. If the original queen is there, they're not going to swarm. She's got a place to lay. And then the nukes that you made, if the queens are successful, you've got extra queens, extra hives. You can do things with those later. Better.
You can see a lot of this is all decision-making, learning process either way. There isn't an exact way to do it for today's situation.
Yeah.
You have to think, why are they doing this? What's the weather like? Is there nectar coming in, flowers and stuff blooming, or what time of year it is? Just a lot of processing you go through, and I keep notes of this stuff, so you can remember when you did something or what the situation was, so you can kind of go back. But a lot of decision making has to be on your own.
For someone that's new,
Right.
having spare boxes, spare frames,
Yep.
may not be.
I'd say the first year, you're not likely to encounter overcrowding.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then about the time you
But
say
in the
that,
first year,
Yeah.
that's exactly right.
take off.
Yeah.
But in the first year, don't forget, you're gonna have extra boxes in the first
Yeah.
2 months.
Yeah.
So you've got some expandability. Dean and I have to approach it different than John does, because we tend to use 2 deep and then add supers on top of those. So we have to be careful. The other factor is Dean's got a lot of hives to jockey around. I have 4 to 6, so I have to be a little bit more careful. Likelihood out of 3 hives, the likelihood of all 3 of those being overcrowded is minimal. One of those being overcrowded out of 3 is pretty darn good. You're gonna eventually find one of those overcrowded. But
Well, and that's another thing you can do when you've got multiple hives. You know, let's say one of your hives is really crowded and the other one isn't. Well, you need to make some space in this one, and the other hive needs a boost, so you can move frames from one to the other. You want to
bees
make
and all,
bees and all.
So these are-
Yeah, you want to make sure the queen's not on there. You don't want to move the queen, but yeah, you can move frames around. So it can be a boost for the hive that's struggling, or it could be, you know, give some space to the one that's overcrowded.
the first year, every time you open that lid, you should be practicing finding that queen. I don't mean to go overboard with it, but absolutely try to consciously practice finding that queen. Because as you just witnessed, in this conversation alone, we had at least 3 times when we needed to find the queen, and make sure
Yeah.
she was not somewhere. She wasn't
Don't make it the first thing that you do, because there are other more important things.
Right.
But every time you're in there, yeah, it's a good idea to practice trying to find her,
I
because
still can't find
it's a
the
skill.
queen, on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you switch in frames, do you make sure all the bees are off of it?
No, you don't have
You
to.
don't.
You certainly, you know, can shake the bees off and then move the frame. But it's weird, because if those bees tried to go in the other hive, they would fight them off, right? But if you take the frame and put it in the hive, I notice when I put a frame in a hive that it doesn't belong to, I notice the bees in the hive kind of go zzz, like an abnormal buzz. But that's the only reaction I ever see. So yeah, it's weird. You would think that they'd recognize they're different bees and they'd fight, but they don't.
Don't forget, as we were talking about, moving queen cells that you're finding and redistributing or something, you have to have bees to go with them.
Yeah.
You have to have an abundance of bees when you've got raw queen cells.
Yep.
You can't just put the thing, the cell on it in the new box.
I raise some queens, and so I'll end up with the queen cell, and then I need to get resources out of my other hives so that these queens can go out and get mated. And of course, I'm using mediums again, but I find that the bare minimum that I've been successful with is 2 frames of bees. So 1 frame of brood and bees, 1 frame of honey and bees, and then that queen cell. And that's enough. She can go out and get mated, and the bees will take care of her, and they'll be okay. Any less than that, and sometimes the bees will abandon the queen cell, or sometimes they don't, but there's just not enough to get it up and going. So, and if you're working with deeps, I don't think 1 would be enough, so I would say again, 1 frame of bees and brood and 1 frame of bees and honey, probably the bare minimum for you making splits. Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit, because it can be really important, whether it's an emergency queen, you know, you pinched her and something happened, or it's super seizure, or like you said, why don't I just make a bunch of splits intentionally? So the bees are going to find the larva that's the right age, and they're going to start raising a queen on this is day 3, because it's an egg for day, it's an egg for 3 days. We'll get there. So on day 4, that's when they're starting to raise this emergency or super seizure, or in Eric's case, he made an intentional split. So the brood from the original queen is going to be emerging all the way out here to day 22. Your new queen's not going to lay any eggs until day 25, but they're not going to emerge until day 45. So this is what I wanted to point out. These 23 days when there are no new bees emerging, and we know bees live 4 to 6 weeks. So if, let's say that they all were going to live 6 weeks, but we've got 3 weeks with no bees emerging, that's half your bees that aged out and died before you've got any new brood. So if you accidentally pinch a queen, it can really set a hive back. When you make a split, it really sets them back. It's going to be a while before your population starts going up again.
This calendar is extremely important to have in your arsenal, because it shows you the lifespan, the life cycle. Our timing is extremely critical here, because our season is so short.
Yeah.
If you're going to do queens, or you're going to make splits, you have to plan it and do it deliberately on the schedule.
Yeah, like if you set them back by 23 days before the honey flow, then the population is not going to be as high as it should be. You're not going to make as much honey. If this happens after the honey flow is over, it's not such a big deal. But if it happens too close to fall, are they going to have enough time to build up again for winter?
You're not gonna build a strong hive if
Yeah.
you split it in October.
Could you intentionally start the cycle and then get a hitchhiker queen? Like buy a queen from someone, bring it in, and then raise that queen that's already, coming in?
Yes, so whether it's intentional or an emergency
So you
where,
can see that gap,
right,
hypothetically.
and that's what this is leading into. Well, we're going into
As
swarming.
long as you have a bee population to go with it.
Yeah, what this is leading into is, let's say it's an emergency queen. Let's say you saw what happened. I pinched the queen, here she is dead on the bottom of the hive. Instead of waiting for them to raise a new one, you could go out tomorrow and buy a queen and introduce her. And so that's when we start talking a little bit about the queen cage and introducing them in the queen cage. Because even if you leave the cork in for 3 days and then take it out, even if it's 6 days before the new queen emerges, she's mated and she's going to start laying as soon as the bees have accepted her. So, you've shaved how many days off of that 23 days broodless? Yeah.
However, if it was 2 weeks, before you noticed, the queen was gone, now you're in trouble.
What happens if you accidentally pinch her or whatever right before winter?
Right before winter. That's when it's hard to buy a queen, but you may find somebody who's got one. Yeah, if it's really close to winter, they might not be able to raise a new one. They'll try, but there won't be any drones out there for her to mate with. No, they'll stay and they'll all end up dying.
So what should you do? If that happened,
Try to find a queen?
and you couldn't find a queen,
But it came back?
if you find a
Take
queen,
one out of one box.
you can't just take one of your queens,
Yeah.
because she's a virgin. She doesn't have any drones. Okay,
Incorporate your bees into other boxes?
Yep.
you combine those boxes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you've got weak hives, that's a good place to use
Throughout the
them.
year, if you've got weak hives that are not thriving, combine them. Don't wait until you are confirmed that they're not thriving. That's the reason why we do multiple hives.
Yeah.
So we can compare these things.
Some people will try and balance all of their hives, especially before the nectar flow. But not everybody, but yeah, some people will try and make sure they're all balanced so that they're all doing as well as they can before the nectar flow. Some people view it as, if this hive is struggling, I'm just not going to throw any more resources at it, and when I get a chance, I'm going to put a different queen in there because there's something not right with the bees, with the genetics. I wanted to point these out, these queen cells. So we saw some in Dean's dead out. This is actually a picture of one of Dean's frames from last year, and then this is off of the internet. So that's what queen cups can look like. And queen cups are not a concern. They're always there. See, the frame is on the edge, so this is another one, this is another one. They're all pointing down. But look at them, especially if your bees are getting crowded, and you see these, look at them and see if there's an egg or a larva in it. As soon as there's an egg or a larva, then they're in the swarm process, and you need to do something.
So on the swarm topic,
Yep.
so the reading really didn't say how to deal with a swarm, like, they're swarming.
Yep.
Is there a way, I'm sure there's a way to catch the swarm, hypothetically.
Yeah, I need to add that to the text. And there's a lot, you can find a lot of stuff out on the internet. A lot of it depends on where the swarm land. Is it something that you can access? So, in a perfect world, they land on a tree branch and they're about this high off the ground. And what you do is you take a nuke box with some frames, not completely full, leave yourself a little bit of space, but some frames, or a one hive body, 10 frames. Take a few frames out, cut the branch off, and just let the bees down into it, and they'll fan out on the frames. Eventually there'll be hardly anything left on the branch. You shake them off, put a few more frames in there, close the box up, and then the best case scenario, if you can, leave the box there until dark, because there's still going to be bees flying around. There's going to be some scout bees around. But once it gets dark, all of the bees will be back, and they'll be in your box. You can put a ratchet strap on it, and you can take it home, take it where you want to put it.
If you have an empty hive next to the swarming hive, will they be inclined to go into it?
No, they have a tendency to go like 300 yards away at least and collect up and then move out from there.
That's not good news.
Now, I've had empty,
That's a lot of walking. Where I'm at, they could go like.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
300 yards away.
yeah, you
They're
could,
gonna do it right when you come home, so you can see that they're
Right.
doing it,
Exactly.
They aren't gonna do it in the middle of the day when you aren't around, because they'll wait for you. He hasn't home yet, well, why you can
So wait till they get there.
there.
I had, in the open field, I was unaware of it, but the neighbors were walking in the walking path there and noticed the ball of bees on the
Yeah.
base of a cedar tree there. And, all right away, and so, they come right out of my hive. Remember, when they swarm like that, the queen is not a long flyer.
yeah,
Doesn't mean she can't fly a long ways back. 9 times out of 10, she's gonna land within sight of the hive.
Yep.
And the bees are gonna go around her for that first night.
so when you get to,
Right, so that was one of our questions.
And I thought they couldn't fly when they were the queen.
Well, getting into that process, they will put her on a weight reduction plan inside the hive.
Yep.
And I'm running her down to get her down the flying way.
Yep.
So that they,
she can fly again. She can fly again in for a swarm, yep.
in a normal state. she can
That's what
fly.
I was thinking, they just carry
No,
her.
I watched a video on PBS this week where they were clipping the wings at the Weaver
Yep.
bee factory, so, in that case, she couldn't fly. They're deliberately raised wings and they clip one wing, so she can't fly.
So then she never could go anywhere.
She'd never go anywhere.
But-
She's already mated, she's a hybrid queen,
Yeah.
she's in the hive, she's staying.
But what happens is the bees don't know that the queen can't fly.
Yeah.
How long she
So,
did, 5 years?
The bees go out of the hive to swarm. The queen tries to go with them. She doesn't know she can't fly. She ends up on the ground.
Oh.
And if you're lucky, she goes back in the hive and the bees come back and then they do it again. But yeah, the clipped wing, it maybe helps you identify the queen a little bit better, but it doesn't keep her in the hive when they go to swarm, and she just ends up on the ground, so.
They're
I-
like, we are smarter than you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense Michael Bush, his website, he's worded it that way. The queen doesn't know that she can't fly, so why would that prevent her from trying? It's like, oh yeah, and the bees don't know either, so they try and swarm, and it's just, they're never successful. These are some queen cups that are probably queen cells. If you zoomed in on those, they probably have larvae in them. And see how that's the bottom. That box is tipped up and we're looking right up the bottom of the box. So it's the bottom of the frames. All right, so we talked a little bit about making splits. Talked about that too. Some of these questions repeat themselves. I should have just let you guys keep talking while I was catching up, because we've talked about a lot of these already.
I'll ask a question. Will you,
Yeah.
who had the dead boxes?
Dean?
Do you clean that all out, or will you put,
No.
you don't have to clean it all out? You can
I
put-
took it home and I shook all the dead bees that were on it, kind of banged it around so they would fall out of the cells, but they could, but they didn't all, and I just,
But down in the bottom of the box, you clean those out.
yeah, I cleaned that bottom board,
Okay,
because
but
there was a
you
lot.
reuse those, so they don't have to redraw it all out?
Right.
Okay.
See, it's Lyme disease,
Yeah.
so they're all good, just like a normal.
So that's the kind of box I would use if I found a frame with queen cells on it, I could stick
Oh,
2 of those frames in this hive and all the cells, they're all drawn out, they're ready to go.
What if
or
it's-
for us newbies, if we lose one, then we can get it, we can use that again next year.
The mites is the same, right? Because all the mites would have died with them.
Yes.
Yep. So we haven't talked about requeening, or we haven't talked too much about requeening, so I'll start over here because I lost track. So let's say that we decide that we've got a hot hive and we want to replace the queen. So somebody else, why would replacing the queen make this hive calm down?
It's a hot.
Get rid of
Yeah.
all the
Aggressive.
genetics.
So yeah, you've put a new queen in there with different genetics, and 4 to 6 weeks down the road, all of the old bees are dead and the ones in there are from the new queen. So that's why if you've got an aggressive hive, putting a new queen in
To
there.
get rid of the old queen first?
There you go. So that was the first question, is what do you need to do if you're gonna requeen a hot hive? So you need to get rid of the old queen first. Yep. What are some of the next things you're gonna need to do? Putting a new queen in a,
Put her in there safely and then let the other bees kind of customize themselves, her.
acceptor,
Yeah.
yeah, get used to her, yep. So you leave the cork in the cage, right? How long until we pull the cork out and maybe like look at the queen and see if she's being accepted?
3 days, but if we're doing it wrong on that.
3 days. I think 3 days is enough if you're gonna pull the cork and then let them release candy. And then the other thing is, 3 days has gone by and we're looking at the queen cage, it's been in there 3 days. Do you remember some of the ways you can tell that they've accepted her? No, that's all right.
Are they eating?
The way that they're facing, and the video is way better than me explaining it. If they're facing the queen, they're trying to feed her. If they've got their stingers towards the queen, they're trying to sting her. And you can see, like the video talks about, it's like Velcro, their legs and their pinchers are on the metal screen when you try and wipe the bees off. Not only that, they're pulling on those wires, and you can see the bees are hunched like this because they're pulling, but it's an experience thing. So if you pull the queen cage out and it looks like they're accepting them, you're confident they've accepted the queen, you can open it up and let her go. So let's say that we did that. We opened the cage up and let the queen go. What should you do right away once you've released her? So watch the way the bees react to her, because if they haven't accepted her, they might start trying to ball her. And again, the video that I shared is way better than describing it. You can also sometimes kind of tell by the way the queen acts. If she's just nonchalant and she goes over to a cell and looks in it like she's going to lay an egg, because she can tell if she's been accepted or not. If she starts darting around and like as soon as a bee approaches her, she turns the other direction, they haven't accepted her. And so if you watch her long enough, they'll probably start balling her. Yep. Put her back in queen cage and give it another few days. So Eric, let's say that the queen hasn't been accepted, so you put her back in the cage. Is there something else you should do rather than just giving it more time? I may not have put it in the text now that I think about it. So what was the first stage again? We found the old queen, right? What if you missed one? What if they had raised another one and you missed the queen cell and there's a virgin queen in there? Will they accept this queen if there's a virgin in there? No. No, not a chance.
So you look around for another queen,
What's that?
look around for another queen.
Look around for another queen that's loose in the hive. Yep. Who was it was telling me?
Queens and those.
What was the deal? I think it was Kelly Lyons, the guy that used to bring in packages.
Just went for it.
Released the queen in the package, you know, and installed it, and it's like, oh, she's been in here long enough, and he released the queen into the package and put the hive back together, and then he gets to looking in the box, you know, the syrup can, and there's wax drawn out on the syrup can, and he's looking at the wax cells on the syrup can, and there's eggs in there. So there was a queen in the package, and he released the one out of the cage, and it's like, oh, wonder if she's dead already.
When you, tell the first queen to get out of there,
Mm-hmm.
you wait for them, or
So he's asking, if you kill the first queen or remove her, how long do you have to wait? How long before the hive knows that they're queenless? It's typically only an hour or so. When I'm doing queen cells, I'll move the frames of bees into boxes in the morning, and I'll put capped queen cells in there in the afternoon. And I don't even know if you need that long. They can tell pretty quickly. But since she's in a cage, you don't need to wait. So you could kill the queen or remove her and put the queen cage in there right away. And they will try and kill the queen in the cage at first, but a few hours later they know that they're queenless, and then sometime after that they accept this new one. Yeah. Yep. So, is it your turn?
Sure.
All right, so this is back to splits, sorry. So if we're making splits, are we gonna get 100% of those queens successful?
You mean, like splitting,
Like when we caught a hive that's gonna swarm, so we pulled a bunch of frames out. No, no. So I don't know what percentage is, but if you get better than 50%, you're probably doing pretty well.
So what happens if you didn't get it? And you find this one? You bring it back?
If you find a swarm out hanging on a branch or something, yeah, if you're capable of catching them, you can't put them back in the same hive, but you can catch them, you can start a new hive with the swarm. Yep.
You can put them in the hive that you originally planning to.
If there are no bees in it at the moment, yes. If it's an empty hive or empty box, yeah, yep. So we talked about checking for acceptance. There's videos, remove the queen cage. I added this today, so some of you may not have seen this. And your queen is not going to come in one of these, but if you're comfortable with moving the queen out of the cage she comes into one of these work way better. The frame that this is sitting on is not what you need. You need to find a frame of capped brood with some bees starting to emerge. So maybe there's a few open cells where you can tell a bee came out of it recently, but everything else is capped. You would put the queen on that frame. You've already brushed all the bees off of it. You put the queen on that frame, and then you take this cage and you push it in around her. So now she can run around, and as you know, maybe if there's a few open cells, that's a good idea too. She can lay. As the new bees emerge, that opens up spaces where she can lay. These new bees that emerge, they don't know that's not their original queen. They accept her right away. So now you've got bees inside the cage with the queen that they've accepted her, and they can't get out of this cage, but they can touch and intermingle with the other bees in the hive. They're spreading the queen's pheromone around. So again, you're going to want to go 3 days, but she's been in here laying, and this is way more successful than the little introduction cages.
Now, where did those new emerging bees get fed from? The other bees?
The other bees will feed them through the wire. Yeah, and you can buy these. I just found this link mainly because it's got the information. These are really easy to make out of hardware cloth. It's got to be 1/8 inch hardware cloth though. The 1/4 inch, the queens can get through and the bees can get through. Well, maybe the queens can't, but the bees definitely can. that won't work because the bees will go in there and they'll kill her. And 1/8 inch hardware cloths is a little harder to find, but you can easily make these, and I usually make them about that big. So it's nice to have some open cells and some capped broods, so she's got a place to lay right away.
You hook the cat bird and shove that in.
Yeah, so these edges here that get pushed into the brood, they kill the brood that they get smashed into, so you are sacrificing some, yeah, yep.
Run into the jail cell.
Yeah. So, laying workers, we've talked a little bit about multiple eggs per cell. This picture really sets it off. I mean, that's a lot of eggs per cell. A new virgin queen wouldn't make that many mistakes, so that's definitely laying workers. I've never had to deal with it. You can't just put a queen in there in a cage, even in a push-in cage. It's so far gone. That's some people say you can add a frame of brood and maybe they'll raise a new one. If you get them to raise a new queen on their own, it's going to work, but that's probably not going to happen. Have you dealt with laying workers?
Yeah, I shake the bees out away from the hive.
So you shake the bees out away from the hive. Do they go back in the original hive?
Most of them do,
And then
except the ones that's laying eggs, they can't.
supposedly they can't find their way back.
All the bees.
All the bees.
You take the boxes, all the boxes, out, away from the hive, dump them all out. Get rid of all the bees out of that box. Comb's okay, and any brood that's packed is okay.
Yep.
Bring it all back, reassemble it,
Then do you put a queen in a queen cage in there?
that'd be the best.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
So the ones that are laying, the babies that can't fall?
No.
Well, I guess how do you get the laying queen, or laying workers?
So you're asking why don't the laying workers fly back to the hive?
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
They can't fly. They'll be too big. They're trying to lay eggs, and they aren't like a regular worker bee.
So I've heard a few different theories on it. Some of it is they can't fly. One theory is they, for some reason, they can't find their way back to the hive because they could crawl back there, right? The other theory is they make it back to the hive, but by shaking all of the bees out, it's all so disoriented. It's kind of like when you shake a bunch of bees into a package, it's like a swarm. They're so disoriented that they get back to the hive. And when they get back to that hive and they discover there's a queen in there, it's like hitting the reset button. And the laying workers stop laying because now there's a queen and there's queen pheromone. So a lot of it is there's no queen pheromone in the hive. The queen pheromone suppresses the worker's ability to lay. So now there's no queen, they can't raise another one. It's the lack of pheromone that creates the laying
It's something
workers.
to try because your hive's gonna die anyway, because
Yeah.
you won't have any worker bees, coming out that can do anything. It's all gonna be drones.
Sounds like a recipe for pissing a bunch of bees off.
Four of them are gonna find their way back in, but the nurse bees are out on their.
Okay, I think we've talked about all of this.
You can jumpstart that situation by putting some frames from another hive in there.
Yeah, yep. So that's the other thing, the brood pheromone will suppress. I'm not so sure about suppressing laying workers, but it might help. It does suppress the swarm instinct a little bit. So brood pheromone will do that. So you asked earlier tonight about crystallized honey, and I thought I'd touch on that briefly. So if you get into, it's not really official, but if you're selling raw honey or people that are buying raw honey, there's kind of like some unofficial guidelines for raw honey. And one of them is you can't heat it above 104 degrees. So to reliquefy crystallized honey at 104 degrees, I've not been successful with it. I've got a cooler with a light bulb in it on a dimmer switch, and then that's hooked up on an Inkbird thermostat. So I could set it at 103 or 102, so it doesn't get over that 104. And I've done it, but it's like I've had jars of honey in there. Sometimes I've had them in there for a week and it doesn't do much. Sometimes I've had them in there for a few days and most of it reliquefies, but it still ends up with some crystallized in the bottom. I sell mine as raw honey. And so when people at the farmer's market ask me, what do I do if it crystallizes? I ask them, well, what are you eating the honey for? If you're eating it for the beneficial properties, like the probiotics and prebiotics that are in the honey, I say, just eat it once it crystallizes. Because if you heat it up enough to liquefy it, that's enough to start destroying some of the beneficial properties. And it changes the flavor a little bit too. If you're not necessarily eating it for that, you don't care that it's raw, then yeah, a simmering pan of water on the stove will heat it. And I mean simmering, just little tiny bubbles. Dean has got something, he can put a whole bucket in and bring it up. What temperature do you hit to get a 5-gallon bucket?
My bottling tank was full of crystallized honey, and I turned that up to 110.
110?
We just warmed up
Crystallizes
3
when it
days.
freezes, right?
No, just crystallization is just a natural process. It goes quicker depending on how much sucrose compared to fructose, and I don't remember which is which, but
You just want to do that damn bottles, put it on the toast.
yeah, there you go, yeah. No, it's like, so in the grocery store, that honey has been heated up pretty high, and I want to say like 170, and then it's filtered when it's that warm, so they call it an ultrafiltration. So it removes any pollen or any little tiny seed crystals or any impurities get filtered out, and it'll stay liquid on the grocery store for, 2-3 years. Raw honey, depending on what it is, it's going to start to crystallize in a couple of months. Most of mine, I want to say 3-4 months. I put some in the deep freeze so that it doesn't crystallize. The deep freeze will slow that process down. And then as the raw honey standards, you can freeze it and it's still raw honey. It doesn't seem to destroy the beneficial properties.
If you don't get the moisture content low enough at the point when you extract it, then you're gonna risk it fermenting.
Yeah. Dean, you brought a tester for that, didn't you? Yeah, so it's got to be below 18, I think 17 and a half or less is what they usually recommend. That's a moisture content, and it's marked in the little meter it'll show you.
So the crystallization, sorry, I've only ever seen like honey bottle, like, I don't know, is it like not clear?
It looks like a rock.
Yeah, like that, this is really crystallized, and this is mostly crystallized. If,
Okay.
if I sat that like that for a half an hour, most of it will flow back down, but it's that. And you can play around with that, yeah. That's what I've been using for my throat this whole class. It's like I just barely can squeeze enough out of it tonight to use
I
it.
have honey over here to try too, and some
Okay.
creamy honey also.
Yeah.
We can detect the refractometer to see
How
what,
do you do cream honey?
I'll explain that.
You just.
It goes from one, it varies from one year to the next. We had this discussion just the other, last meeting. The three of us are here, and one of us, all the honey crystallized almost immediately, and the other one is just doing fine. I'd
Depends
say
on
about
the
50%
resources.
of mine crystallized, I would say within a month after.
Within a month.
we extracted it.
Yeah, and temperature does affect it. So like if you put it in a cool basement, it'll crystallize faster than like a warm cupboard. But there's,
It really depends on the content of
Yep.
the moisture is one factor that you can control to a certain extent.
Yep.
The other mineral content, you don't have control.
I think it's fruit. Now I lost it. Fructose and glucose. I think it's the glucose higher. The higher that content is, the faster it'll crystallize. And there are some things like black locust honey will go years and years and years before it'll crystallize because
The
it's
vanilla honey will
Yeah.
crystallize kind of before you get it out of the frame.
before you get it out of the frames, they say. Yeah.
There was a discussion on Facebook about the very same thing, only it wasn't about crystallization, it was about the bubbles.
Bubbles.
It looked like it was crystallized, but it was actually just bubbles. 3 out of 4 people said it was sunflower that caused that.
Interesting. I've seen that question before, and the people will be asked, when you were extracting the honey, did you forget to open up the gate at the bottom, because the honey will start going up and the frames that are spinning start stirring it. That'll put a lot of air in it. Yeah, yeah.
That'll be a mess.
Never done that before.
So a couple of things I haven't had time to put in the text that I probably will and that we haven't talked about is having a nuke box around for emergencies is really handy. So if you see a swarm, you to catch them, you got to have something to put them in. So those corrugated carton or plastic boxes that nukes come in, those are really nice to have one or two around. If you go into a hive and you find swarm cells, you can use those to start making your splits, or just having enough equipment to have another hive. I've had quite a few beginning beekeepers go through the class, and that very first year, something happens, they catch somebody else's swarm, and they're like, boy, I sure was glad we had the extra equipment. Or the reverse, I needed the equipment for a swarm and didn't have it, and went down to Dayton's, and they didn't have what I needed. Or Ron Reinders had somebody call him on vacation, and he's directing them to go out to his bee yard and find these empty boxes to go catch somebody else's swarm. So yeah, nuke box is pretty handy for those. Tonight we did talk about adding brood frames. You can add a frame of brood to a weak colony, and sometimes it can really boost it. And it's not just the number of bees and the number of brood. They say that like the healthy colony that you take a frame out of might have like some beneficial microbes in the brood food. And by putting that in the unhealthy colony, you spread those around. So now you've got a healthier hive. So that can be a big boost. We did talk tonight about how to catch a swarm. Does everybody have bees lined up for spring? Does anybody? You've got yours?
I know who I'm ordering from.
Knew who you're ordering from? Okay, so don't wait, because they can run out. I've been hearing from commercial beekeepers are finding really huge losses all of a sudden in the last month. Todd mentioned it, and then Project APHIS-M sent out an email. They're doing a survey of commercial beekeepers. So if a lot of the commercial beekeepers taking bees to California right now are losing bees, then bees are going to be hard to buy come spring. So don't wait any longer. As far as I know, Todd is still taking orders. We know Phil is out. I haven't talked to Marlene this year. I mean, sometimes she does, sometimes she doesn't. So there's a resource. Tyler is a really good resource, and he'll bring them somewhere in the area, most likely. Yeah, a lot of times up to Todd's. He's got relatives in Merrill. Thank you. I would love to get some Ellen's bees. You'd have to drive down to Des Moines to get them, but it'd be worth the trip. Laps, Foley's, and then Jim down at Dayton's was reminding me that Valhalla in Lincoln is a place you can get them. And I looked the other day, and they're selling packages for $165. Be a trip to Lincoln to pick them up. Yeah.
Do you know anyone that's ever gotten bees from Hardington?
Is that the
Benson Honey Farms?
Benson Honey Farms in Hardington? No.
$150 for a nukes.
That's pretty cheap for a nuke.
Pretty cheap for a nuke.
That's where I'm,
Did you specify how many frames?
yeah, so it's 5 frames,
Wow.
2 frames of cat brood, a frame of food, and 1 in progress. Something like that. 2 to 3
Okay.
capped, 1 frame of food and 1 frame in progress.
Where at?
In the Hardington, it's about 45, probably an hour from Cicely, west. But it's a lot closer.
Yeah, and I haven't heard of that one, so that might be something. Yeah.
I'll let you know how it goes.
How about equipment? Has everybody got equipment lined up? Yeah? Working on it? Yeah. So equipment isn't quite as touchy as bees. I mean, people will run out of bees, but Dayton's does have a rush now and then, and run out of equipment or not have exactly what you want. And then the other thing is, if you're saving some money and assembling things, you want to get it. You may find that you're not real good at putting frames together. So the sooner you get started on them, the better. What else was I wondering about besides bees and equipment? Locations, everybody figured out where they're going to put them? Yeah? Yeah, okay.
Speaking of location, John, have you done a good get hurt lately on your area out there?
No,
No, there were two flower farms,
no. So my bees are just north of town.
Associating it, dead, right between this,
Oh, well, I know Furrow.
there's two of them.
Jamie Burrows got flowers there.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's one of them, there's another one just west of that.
What do you mean the flower?
Flower Farm.
What's a flower farm?
They grow flowers.
They grow those flowers.
Oh, like literally a
Just
flower
flowers.
farm?
Yeah.
Okay.
She and her mother took this class about 4 years ago, and she had a hive at her place, and her mother had the other one out by the vineyard out on Highway 20, and she couldn't get in there. It was a hot hive, I guess, because anytime she went to it, she was getting stung and everything else, trying to run into flowers and goats instead of the
Gotcha.
Well, my wife pointed out that those are hybrid flowers, the blooms and for retail sale,
Yeah,
then not any good for bees at all.
the bees might totally ignore them. Yep.
Might not be enough, that's what I need to worry about.
Yep, the bees might totally ignore them.
Yep. Bees would love, they love natural.
We're ready for you,
wild
Dean.
flowers, and that's where they, dandelions, they love dandelions.
So Dean has got some stuff out in the atrium for us to go check out. Dave, see if you can turn the Wi-Fi on that, because I think it's off.
You combine that,
Yeah,
I don't know how you do that.
the newspaper combine is the best way. So like if you've got one box, put the newspaper on top of it, and you take your other box and put it on top. A lot of people put some holes in the newspaper. These will remove the paper, and by the time they've done that, they've kind of exposed themselves to each other enough that they know what's selling. Yeah.
You better do it, John, I can't, I don't know how to run it. It's all right.
Okay, it's on. Yes, okay. So, let's turn the video camera on. I can't see from here.
Yeah.
So if you can turn the video camera on and then take that out there,
Yeah.
I would spotlight it. Should be a little zoom icon for,
I don't need,
there you
I don't need
go.
audio?
You can do audio. Hang on one second though. Now you can do audio.
All right, I'm gonna pull up. Okay. I got them both.
Spotlight for everyone. Say something.
You got it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
No, I don't. Did I spotlight the wrong one?
Yep, that's, audio's on and it's, working.
I don't see you. And you're muted.
Well, I see myself, that's for sure.
Why don't I see you? So I'm asking you to unmute. Is that showing you anything? Now you're gone. Did the Wi-Fi kick you off already?
No?
You're off
Yes,
of,
it did.
you're off of Zoom. No, it kicked you off already. Well, on second thought, let's don't worry about it. I will try and video this part of it on my phone and I'll try and share that.
He doesn't fly out.
Of course, there's something about it. Some of them have safety switch on. All it's doing is just bringing out the honey, the bottom of the room, when it's happening. Then raining on the sides here, little droplets. And they're all the room down. Another thing on the east, that's salt out of it, we don't go straight in. So, not crazy like this, so it's house out there, so, but I provide the service to it's done. Oh, you can take the frames and you can just straight all this stuff. So, and we have to do all of it, especially if you do the back. Most people, this is their routine. I think they're like, and just run with it in the right step. We walk out the entire day. Gather, we usually gather dozen or so season. And then if they want to just lay out exactly this, and then they're, do it all in one day, and then we have the full cleanup section. We have been doing it this last year, when I'm done with this, I just leave it all.
He was outside.
Weeds that are around that. I said, no, we need to do this operation in close, the garage. I do the garage. I'm sure.
That's the story time to speak. You said, is there other options? Why is that? You just got the in-cap stuff. You cut the in-cap stuff out.
samples of honey, and here's the refractometer to check the moisture. So, for refractometer, this checks the moisture content. This what I said, just a little bit of honey on that. You can see in there, there's a line. You look at, there's several scales on that side glass. You
Yeah,
look at the one clear to the right.
okay. Where that blue thing is?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, if you didn't have any honey in there, the whole thing would be blue.
I see.
But the honey in the blue drops down, and it's where it changes from blue to clear is the line that you're reading. What that would say
They
has
have a
that
piece of the honey with green honey. It's a crystallization process. So that's kind of crystallized honey. They take a pound of that with 10 pounds of wet raw honey, mix it together once it crystallizes. That's all I need is because if you put this wet honey on your toast and it's all over your hand.
Good stuff.
So you remember science class and seed crystals? So honey will crystallize all on its own. So when we make cream honey, all we're doing is taking crystallized honey. You can buy starter at Davies. So the starter is crystallized honey that's been ground up really, really fine. So it's all really fine crystals. You mix that, 10% of that with liquid honey. And the way that the crystallization process works is when the honey bumps into a crystal, it makes like 4 copies, really fine. And then those 4 make 16 copies.
Really good.
And then, yeah,
So
so
it's just crystallized, huh?
it's just crystallized honey.
But it's controlled.
It's controlled so that it's all really fine, and that's why it's that smooth texture.
I see.
If it's really
Yeah,
big crystals,
it's
they're
gritty, right?
crunchy and hard and gritty. Exactly.
That's one of our big sellers.
Good stuff.
Last year
Yeah,
at
it's
the
good.
Iowa Honey Producers Conference, I bought a cream honey machine. to mix it. So we made 150 pounds of cream honey last fall.
We even seen, they make flavor.
Yep.
Yeah. Lots of flavors, which we
Yeah.
don't, because supposedly you're supposed to have a certified kitchen if you're adding stuff to
Yeah, in Iowa, you have to have this.
And from the North American Bee
USDA?
Expo,
No?
I saw for cinnamon honey was, these guys were talking about green honey, there was 2 different outfits that were doing it. So how much cinnamon do you put in to make it cinnamon flavor? It was like 2 cups of cinnamon and a 5-gallon bucket.
Yeah, it takes a lot. Yeah, it just needs to be a commercially inspected kitchen to be legal. So like you could go to a cafe, someplace that serves food that would let you just use their kitchen for an afternoon and make cream honey. You're supposed to bottle it there too. Once it's in the bottle, then you store it at your place. But to be legal in Iowa, if you've added anything like cinnamon flavor, it's supposed to be done in a commercial kitchen.
It's straight out of the extractor into a bottle.
Yeah.
No problem, you can sell it all you want.
Because that's minimal process.
Yeah.
As soon as you add something to it, it's different, it changes it in the law.
Can you tell a difference in your honey from hive to hive?
Yes,
From hive to hive.
Yeah.
it'll depend on the time of year. Is the bloom cycle is what's more used. What's a method. So depending on where they're located,
It's kind of like that, it's just not
late
very.
in the season, it'd be very distinctive if the golden was dominant. You would definitely be able to tell.
What makes, one time I bought, and it was almost like really dark brown.
But we,
I've only seen it once, but I don't know.
That commercial guy that's by me, he says that people like the honey from those hives in particular more than any other hives that he has.
The dark brown honey?
Just the honey that's in those hives compared to his other hives. He has like 4 or 5 different sites where he has
depends on
50
what they're
hives.
making.
And that's what we get.
And,
Not that, I don't eat the honey. people ask, I don't try it, I could care less about it.
First time
What the
he
bees-
told me that,
My wife does the honey and it's like, I said, I just assumed that I would drown if I had to try to sell all this stuff.
Where are you gonna do that?
But the different flavors, we have people stopping that, that's just the best that there is.
Well,
But good to know, I guess.
well, the honey producers conference is usually a honey tasting contest.
oh yeah.
Of people submitted.
So they do, what do they call it, blind?
Yep.
They take the honey bottles and they wrap them in aluminum foil, so you can't see what the honey looks like, you can't see whose it is. And then you squeeze it onto a spoon and vote for your favorite.
Whoever has the highest percentage of this is the best.
2 out of 3 times it was Corbert's buckwheat honey
Is that right?
that I've got.
Now, see,
Yeah.
The
buckwheat,
dark stuff?
the real pure buckwheat honey is, it's almost a little bit bitter. Most people,
It is,
most
it's more
people don't-
distinctive than most of the other golden honey.
yeah,
If you want to see the different colors of honey, there was a North American Bee Expo in Louisville, 1st of January, which is a nationwide, probably, they had 3,000 people there. And their display of honey goes from like that wall clear to the end, everything from almost pure white to the real dark stuff. So there's the whole rainbow colors, you know, all the different shades and stuff. And there's Facebook things about that. You can see the pictures. It's really great.
We've got friends that have a lavender farm up in Washington State and waiting for the first batch of honey to come out. See what that's like.
so you can, I bought a jar of Savannah Beacon lavender honey.
Mhm.
And it's a little darker than average, but to me, it tastes more like buckwheat than most.
Oh,
It's kind of weird now that I said that, that's not even, I like buckwheat honey, but I didn't like the lavender.
oh,
So,
I would be curious because it was just dominant, just acres of lavender.
yeah, it is distinct.
So you had a little bit of a picture, and I feel like we talked about at the beginning, you can actually see what bees are bringing in.
Of the pollen.
You can see pollen, because the hind legs, so they've got 6 legs, three sets. The hind set of legs have a special
Pollen baskets.
pollen.
It's like a comb,
Yeah, it's like a little
whiskers
basket
on their legs.
And they pack the pollen in there, and it's actually pretty good size.
It's big.
Yeah, so it's bigger than a grain of rice. So they stop long enough.
Yellow
you
and
can see-
orange and
Yeah. And you'll see different colors. Early in the spring, the maple trees give off some nectar, but mainly pollen. So the first thing, when it's warm enough and the pollen is there, you'll see them bringing in almost white or gray pollen. That's usually really good. I'm not sure what some of the colors are. I was telling them earlier today, I got a picture from 2 or 3 years ago. It's like a whole frame of red pollen. It just, it's everywhere that I've never seen. That's wonderful. I'm not sure. I know, what's that stuff that grows in the cornfields and the wheat fields before they plant? Henbit? That sound right? You don't see it as much here, but if you like head down towards Lincoln in the spring, it's everywhere. It's like a purple bloom. and
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's dead before the farmers plant, so they like it because it actually fixes some nitrogen. I thought it was called henbit, but maybe that's not it. But that's, I think, where it was coming from.
That variety.
I've seen it in Kansas a lot when I was down there. Purple down there.
Yep, it's purple. Yeah, the flowers are
It
purple.
does
the
look,
pollen's
looks
red.
good. This is
Yeah, it's pretty.
aesthetically.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, if you guys want more honey, Lamar's has a business showcase at the convention center. Lamar's on Thursday. We'll be there. Todd Osborne's gonna be there too.
Okay.
With honey. So my wife will be there selling their goods. Before till 8 tonight.
Todd also does the flavored pop. Yeah, so that's the next thing, when selling honey is not enough with popcorn. I've got candles, ocean stick, lip balm.
Is it realistic to think that you could sell most of your honey? Because I mean, all the beekeepers are selling honey. It seems like the market's.
Our first year when we had like 300 pounds or so, it was gone. And we took it out in August and it was gone like first November, December.
It goes fast, you know.
So the last couple of years, we've had enough to make it through the spring. I think she was out of honey, like the first farmer's market she had for a couple of times, but then had to wait until August before we took honey off again.
Did the USDA call you this weekend?
So I think something to consider is.
They called me on Sunday and took a survey
Yeah.
of the honey production.
Yeah, they did me a couple of weeks ago. So, like Dean's got 20-some hives. Part of that is because Dean's wife is selling honey at the farmer's market. So, when I had 4 or 5 hives, honey went to friends, family, things like that. And then I wanted to go to the farmer's market, I wanted to sell honey, so I started more hives, or started managing them a little more intensively, so I started making some honey. If you get to a point where you've got honey you can't get rid of, you'll probably start selling bees, if you have that problem of too many bees, as opposed to having too much honey. If you get to a point where you know that you're gonna get rid of 150 pounds of honey and then more is gonna be a nuisance, then you're probably, oh, this hive is gonna swarm, well, I'll make some splits and I'll sell nukes, as opposed to getting more hives and generating more honey. So you've got that flexibility.
It's a 5-gallon pail of honey weight. 60 pounds?
60. So
So
honey
I
is
don't put 5 gallons.
16 bucks a pound, is what I read?
maybe, I sell mine for 13 bucks a pound, that's counting them.
Ours is $10 a pound.
So honey is 1.5 times the weight of water. So a gallon of water is 8 pounds, a gallon of honey is 12. That's why some people will argue with you when you sell them a pint jar of honey. That's more than honey. We sell honey. So when you go down to David's and you buy the 1 pound queen line jars, the fancy, they're actually designed for honey because it's more light. It's a pound of honey, but if you put liquid in it, it's not going to be 60 pounds, it's going to be 12.
Something like 12 and a half.
So, yeah, and so when you're selling by the pint, you should be selling it as 12 ounces.
So a 5-gallon bucket of honey is 60 pounds?
Well, 5 times 12.
Yeah,
So $800 worth of honey?
I was stunned. I took the survey with the USDA
You
guy
can
this
sell.
weekend.
It's crazy.
He said, how many pounds of honey did you produce? I said, well, we produced about 20 gallons. And then we both had to go back to the calculator and figure out what he wanted. There was $1,100 worth of honey that we produced. And it was out of 4 or 5 hives. I was stunned. I did not realize it. We were producing that much. We were not paying close attention to what we do with it. Yes, my wife will sell a jar or 5 or whatever along the way, and we have some people that like to get it in gallon at a time. I didn't realize that we were overlooking that because nobody wants to go sit in the front of the market. Dean's wife loves going to the farmer's market apparently.
Oh, hi, come on, hi.
That's right.
I'm with you, Dean.
I sit there and like, boom, on.
You gotta go, I don't need to get into that, but how much does it cost to have a stand at the Lamar's farm?
$5. $5 a time.
Sioux City's priced themselves right the hell out of the market.
Yeah, it's expensive.
Oh.
We looked at
Like
that last
500,
year.
isn't it?
It's worse than that.
Of
You can't-
weekend?
It's worse than
For
last year.
season.
You can only have one. You can only have one, honey,
Oh, one honey vendor?
one honey vendor that's primarily honey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it's,
See, that works for a while, but
what works for the day, isn't it?
They don't care, John.
you got more than one jelly vendor.
Well, it's
More than
over
one
100.
vegetable.
It's over 100 a year.
It's like 500 years.
I don't know
Sounds like
because
the
I'm
guy
not
running
doing
the
it.
farmer's market.
I'm going to Lamar's with Dean.
Sounds like the guy running the farmer's market has his own bees.
Yeah, I didn't think so. No, it's not just honey, it's everything else.
Oh,
If
really?
you do birdhouses, there's gonna only be one major birdhouse vendor.
So that's
filtering it pretty damn
uncommon
fine.
for farmers markets, but
We need
they
somebody
have
with
to
some
reach a
land.
balance somewhere because
For the one in the main.
We need somebody with some land to start a real farmer's market. Well, farmers can come and sell the stuff without that kind of burden.
Uh-oh.
We're gonna have a pumpkin patch or one
That was your idea.
I had one this last year.
Did you?
Basically,
This is as much trouble as it looks like.
not really, we use it with chicken feed.
Oh,
Oh, I know.
Pumpkins, chicken.
That's where I got the
oh, you
idea.
didn't open it to the public to come and pick your own pumpkins? Oh, well.
What do you do with it?
Chicken feed, chickens love them.
So you just grew pumpkins and then you threw it to chickens?
Yeah.
And how long does the pumpkin last you?
Yes.
2 or 3 hours.
They'll clean up 5 pumpkins a day,
How many chickens do you have?
30.
30 chickens. Do you have to like cut them or get them started or they just peck them from?
Just throw them on the ground and they break up and then they go to town.
Yeah, you do the same thing with watermelon.
Like I go around town,
Oh,
last year I go around
after
town
Halloween.
after Halloween. Hey, what do you do with the pumpkins? You know, okay, take them off your hands. Throw them on chickens.
I don't know if it's pumpkins or not, but something's a dewormer, natural dewormer. I think it might be pumpkins, but I could.
Hey, I need the crap out of it. Chickens, less money to feed the kids.
Yeah, it's expensive to be chickens, isn't it?
And it's expensive to feed any horses.
You don't.
You want some goats?
No, we haven't started.
Do you have those?
Yeah, we just found
Fading
triplets.
goats.
Fading?
What? My wife loves those things. I got some for you. There you go.
He just found triplets on the ground last week.
Oh, you're kidding. In the middle of winter.
Yeah, they were supposed to be.
Yeah.
The males got out, because that's what they do.
My daughters, they bug me like probably once a week for chicken or for goats. And we moved on to an old family farm and the fencing hasn't been redone since people were so many, high school. So, it was in this